So, again, I think really, the first thing that people should be doing, and this is probably something that, can get neglected at times. People get a little too far ahead of themselves. All right. Hey, Sean.
Hey, Paul. How's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
Good.
Good. Thanks for chatting with me today. Appreciate your time.
Of course.
I'm Paul Clem, licensed broker in Oregon. Sean, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Sean Gordon with Academy Mortgage. I'm licensed along the West Coast, but primarily up in Washington and Oregon and California.
Awesome. So, yeah, I think, the purpose of our conversation here is to outline the buyer process and, try to, simplify things as much as possible. So if somebody is looking to buy a house, they have a kind of a full understanding of, what the steps are, what the expectations are at each step. And, just so they can go into this process with as few question marks as possible. We can first talk about really the first thing that people should be doing is preparing your finances, then determining a budget, determining what somebody can afford and what they're comfortable paying. Once those things are a little clear, we're going to be looking at, what type of property you want and where. So kind of narrowing those things down. And then it's going to be actually looking at properties, touring homes, going through that process, and then making offers. Once you have an offer accepted, you have this contract period. And so, want to be able to talk about what that contract period looks like, what each steps are, what's required of the buyer. And then, we have you obviously. So, we can talk about kind of the lending side of that too. And then once that contract period is up, we can, close on the house and you can move in. We're good to go. So, again, I think really, the first thing that people should be doing, and this is probably something that, can get neglected at times. People get a little too far ahead of themselves, is getting kind of the financial picture in order. So if somebody's preparing their finances, they need to get pre-approved. I mean, what does that process look like from your end?
Yeah. So kind of how it usually works is I talk to people and the first thing I always do is I want to set up an initial call. So I tell people, give me 15 to 25 minutes. Let me introduce myself, go over what goes into a mortgage, explain what the process is and to get fully pre-approved and what that means and entitled and what kind of documents that we would need to do that process. And then also from there, let them know what the timing looks like. So how quickly they'll be able to go out and see a house. Usually in that first call, I kind of just grab some basic information about their income, their assets, their credit standing where they're at, and kind of what they're interested in and just get their expectations on the same page. I usually let them lead with any initial questions they may have. So, what have they heard or what have they done on their own research or talking to friends and family, what's the information that's out there and see if I can, answer some of those questions right off the bat and giving them a comfortable overview of what to expect. And, I always tell clients, this is brand new to you, so use me as a resource. You're going to have a lot of questions. Feel free to reach out when you're going through the whole thing. Use me as somebody that is the expert in the field and can answer all of your questions. So,
awesome, yeah. And so that pre-approval that somebody gets, that's typically good for 90 days, right?
Yeah. So the documents generally are 90 days, and they expire after that. I tell clients it's one of those things. As long as you keep your income, so your employment pays, and also you have your assets, you don't have to pay off a huge debt. Your pre-approval is valid kind of indefinitely in those cases. After 90 days, like you're saying, though, we do pull an updated credit report. If you get into contract, we'll always ask before that. And then same with the documents. We will need updated pay stubs and bank statements. But yeah, 90 days is kind of the rule of thumb.
Totally. Yeah. So, that does give people a pretty good window. I mean, this market's been crazy in particular in the last couple of years, super competitive, inventory is low. And so really this, kind of first step of getting the pre-approval, getting, the financial picture really clear is super important because, homes typically get listed Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and most properties are under contract, by Tuesday, Thursday, sometimes even Sunday, so if you don't have a clear picture of, not only getting that pre-approval letter, but okay, are you going to be comfortable with the payment for a house at this price, that we're offering at, or not? you could very well miss out on even the opportunity to make an offer, because when we're making an offer, we want to include, we really need to include that pre-approval letter to basically show the seller's agent and the seller that this buyer is qualified for this amount, and here's the documentation to prove it.
Yeah, I think you're right. One thing that I always tell clients is there's no downside to getting pre-approved. There's only upside. Then your ballpark, the ceiling that you qualify up to. Then at that point, that's when you can actually go out and enjoy the house hunting process. I tell them, get pre-approved, get it out of the way. My goal is to eliminate the financing stress of the whole home buying process. And so I do that by talking to clients up front, telling them, what's your guideline? How quickly do you need to get out of your current lease place that you're living in? Okay, even if you're looking in a year, start now, because let's say in that year timeframe, you find the perfect house, and it comes on the market, we might as well jump all over it. And getting pre-approved doesn't hurt you by any means. It just takes 20 minutes of your time and getting some documents, but you're going to need to do that one way or another, and then you're ready to jump on house. So.
Totally. Yeah. So something I actually get asked a lot, and I don't know if I 100% have a clear answer. So maybe you can help. So with getting the pre-approval and then potentially needing to get a new one, is there a hard credit check? Is that going to affect somebody's credit necessarily? What does that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I get that asked probably twice a day. And it's one of those things where it's good people are asking those questions because you don't want to be blindsided. But yeah, so when you do make an application, it is a hard credit pull. The good news is that your credit will rebound after that 90 days that you had mentioned earlier. And so after 3 months, your credit score will rebound from that hard inquiry. Also, I think people think that it's a bigger impact on your score. It's only going to be a few points on your score. And you're going to have to do it one way or another. And so my only advice is if you are serious about getting pre-approved for a home, go ahead and do that first. And then if you are deciding to go into other debts or looking to refinancing student loans, auto loans, do that after the fact, but let your lender know that so that they can know the impact. And if they can pull that credit before you inquire on those other debts that you have. So
yeah, totally. Okay. So kind of a necessary evil.
Yeah.
Probably won't have a huge impact necessarily either way.
It's pretty minor and a bounce back. And yeah, exactly. It's one of those things I think people are a little more spooked by it, but it's probably better that way than the other way. So just don't do 10 different things at once. So don't apply for 5 credit cards, a car loan, refinancing student loans, and get a home mortgage, because that's when your credit score is going to see a large impact.
Yeah. And I think some people are maybe kind of aware of this, especially if they're already asking about, a credit pull on a pre-approval. But, I think some people may not fully understand that, okay, you're going through this process, you want to buy a house, generally during that time, people are going through life changes. Maybe they're, they want to buy a new car too, or, they're going to start, opening new credit cards with Macy's to buy furniture or finance appliances and things like that before they have, the transaction closed. So, it sounds like, kind of from what you were saying, definitely want to stay away from that stuff until, you get the final approval, with underwriting and, everything's good and you're moved in.
Yeah, that's a good thing. And it's one of those things that people get excited and it happens often. And it's not the end of the world, but it's one of those things that we always ask when we're going through the process. If you do apply for new credit, let us know so we can see if it's going to impact it. And if it does, then you're going to have to stop that right away, because let's say your ratios are tight, then it could be the difference if you qualify. So,
okay. Yeah. So maybe we could talk a little bit more about loan products, and, kind of what you're seeing and, where maybe, conventional versus FHA makes more sense, things like that.
Yeah, totally. I think a big misconception that a lot of first-time homebuyers, and myself included, for the first few years of my career, thought you had to put 20% down. That was kind of the standard, and what I think all of our parents and every person in the world would always say, you have to put 20% down.
Yeah.
But now, in the last 8 years since I've been in the industry, you really have seen a shift, and they want to encourage and support more first-time homebuyers. And so you're right. FHA is a great route for that. And that's generally somebody that has 3.5% down for a down payment. Maybe their credit isn't built up all the way, or maybe there's something that impacted it previously. So those are great options for it. Or if your ratios are tight for your debt to income ratio, that's another way where FHA is beneficial. However, there are a lot of conventional products now where you can go even down to 3% for a down payment. The mortgage insurance at that rate is more favorable for a first-time home buyer. And a lot of these are products that they want first-time home buyers to get in. So they're encouraging those people to not save and sit back and do all that. They want to let them get some skin in the game. And so it's great. So those are a couple of the products that we work with, that have the lower down payments. And you can use sometimes even to get a down payment assistance to stack on top of those products. So they're great. But I always tell, kind of like I was just saying, is a lot of people, it doesn't hurt to ask and get started earlier, because there's a couple of reasons. By getting pre-approved now, you can see if there's anything on your credit that you can work on to get repaired. Sure. And also in terms of products, you can, see the different options and say, oh, if we save up for another 6 months, that's fine. We're pre-approved still, but we have an extra money that could go towards a down payment. We can afford a little bit bigger of a house, but again, there's no cost to get pre-approved, and you're just ready to go, and you have those options, and you're able to figure out how can I navigate this and make it so it's less stressful.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. I get asked about closing costs a lot too, and maybe in the context of, financing, when somebody is pre-approved or ultimately approved, I mean, is that taking into account, some of those closing costs, that somebody's going to need to bring to ultimately close?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. So closing costs is something where usually people think about the sales price, the loan amount, and the down payment. Right. Something that people forget about is the closing costs. And generally, I tell people kind of rule of thumb, closing costs can get anywhere from $5,000 up to $15,000. And the ranges that you're going to be potentially paying for points to get a lower interest rate. The standard closing costs, no matter what lender you go through, they're going to be pretty much the same. And that's kind of a baseline of around like $5,000 like I'm saying. But like I said, the bigger things, like you said, if you want to go and pay for points, those closing costs will be included. And so on average, about $10,000 can be added to the down payment. When I'm running the pre-approval, you'll see that is included. And so you'll see your down payment is X, and then there's the closing costs on top of it for what you need to bring to close.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. It's something I generally discuss with people, when they're kind of going through this process, is, hey, there are going to be these closing costs that generally a lot of people don't, kind of like you said, they have, these certain things in mind, but those closing costs aren't necessarily one of them as far as the cash that they're going to need to bring, to buy their house. And, people might say, I have X amount of dollars kind of set aside for a down payment. And so generally in having that discussion, it's like, well, you might need to bring, say 10,000, 15,000 more, whatever it is. Or if you can't do that, you may need to reduce your down payment ultimately and reserve some of that cash for your closing costs. So yeah, I think, being that these are things that people don't necessarily have a ton of exposure to, getting started and going into the process, I think it's just, it's going to ultimately probably reduce the amount of headaches people have, or just kind of unexpected costs, if they have that, kind of full, clear picture of everything.
Yeah, that also just goes back to the point of getting pre-approved now, so you know what to expect. When I get people pre-approved, I show them the numbers. I tell clients, this is where interest rates are right now. Here's what you can expect to pay for your monthly payment. Here's what you can expect to pay for your cash due at closing. Obviously, this can change, depending on your sales point and how much you put down and the interest rate when you are in contract. But these are kind of rule of thumb. And so people, I always ask clients, what's your all-in budget that you can allot to cash due at closing, and then from there work backwards, so that you're right, they're not expected or hit with an unexpected $10,000 more that they have to pay. So
yep, absolutely. And if somebody did want to get pre-approved, what's the best way to do that with you?
Yeah, just give me a call or, shoot me an email. It's one of those things where I'm happy to talk. And even just preliminary, even if you're not ready right now, but you're looking in a year, reach out. I'll talk you through the whole process, explain that it's not as scary as it may seem, or it doesn't take as much time as you may think it might. And again, it's just one of those things where you don't have to pay for it. It's just a little bit of your time, and then where you stand and what your ceiling is. So
yeah. Totally. Well, we'll have I guess over here, we'll have your contact information right there. So people can reach out to you if they want to learn more about that step. So probably, happening kind of simultaneously with the conversation with the lender, getting pre-approved, kind of, understanding what the budget would be, what the top end of the budget is, but also what people are comfortable with, kind of while that's taking place. You're probably starting to determine, what areas you want to live in, what type of property you want, how many bedrooms you want. And then from there, working all the way down the list of some of your must-haves, the things that are desired, and so forth. So, but at the same time, until you really get a clear picture of what the budget is, maybe some neighborhoods just don't make sense depending on the house you need, for example. So these things all kind of happen pretty quickly as far as some of these initial steps, or at least they can. But once we've determined, kind of what the needs are, maybe you have to have at least 3 bedrooms, for example. You really want an area that has certain types of amenities. Okay, well, we can narrow down to 3, 4, 5 different neighborhoods or suburbs or whatever it is that kind of fit that criteria, and just see where we're going to have the best opportunity. I think really at that stage, even before going into touring homes, I like to have conversations with people about what they're willing to sacrifice. I know that's kind of a tough conversation to have right out of the gate. It's like, okay, already we're saying, but because inventory has been so low, there's just, far fewer homes to choose from. So, with your budget and your urgency as far as how quickly you need to move, sometimes, you're just kind of at the mercy of what's available. And then based on your budget too, maybe that bonus room or that extra room, or, that extra, 5,000 square feet on the lot, or whatever it is, just might not completely be attainable. So, looking at what you might be willing to sacrifice before even stepping into a home to tour it, I think is going to help set the expectation a little bit. It's going to give you maybe a little bit more of a flexible mindset, and saying, okay, realistically, what's going to give us, the best chance. And if we're holding on to these certain things that we're saying now that we have to have, is that ultimately going to hurt us, in the process? So it's kind of like, what's more important to you, owning a home or owning the perfect home? And, the perfect home, as we kind of know, doesn't really exist necessarily. So these are things that I think, as far as just kind of having a mindset, once you have all your ducks in a row from the lending side, and you're really ready to kind of jump into it, just kind of knowing that, some flexibility is ultimately going to give you a better chance. And then from there, it's, we schedule tours. Okay, we've identified some areas. We've identified what type of property. We're gonna start, touring properties, and kind of like, we've been alluding to, and we talked about earlier, listings come up toward the end of the week. Anything usually that's like remotely desirable, that's priced well, is going to be under contract within, 3, 4, 5 days. Now it seems like the market might be shifting a little bit, cooling off a little bit. That's been my impression in the last 3, 4 weeks. And that's what I've heard from other agents too.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that's true. And it's one of those things where right now it is shifting because interest rates have risen over the last couple of weeks.
Sure.
You've already seen it week to week, it's cooled off a little bit. And like you're saying, it's interesting because for a lot of sellers, they've seen houses going off the market in 3, 4, 5 days. And some of them are going past that date, the review date on Tuesday, which, I think it's good. It's people's expectations kind of got ahead of themselves and they got a little excited. And this is kind of bringing everyone back down to reality, and, having them realize, it's okay if the house sits on the market for more than 3 days. It's okay if you see that the house is, going at list price versus escalating all the way up, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I think because there's a few things factoring into right now. Some of it's buyer's fatigue. Some of it is the interest rates rising. Some of it is people are realizing it's summertime, and so maybe they'd rather go travel, and then they can focus on, because maybe school's out for their kids or themselves.
Sure.
And they want to go travel and get out and not deal with the housing, when they get back from that trip that they've been wanting to do instead. And so all the above, it kind of goes back to what we've talked about, where I always tell clients, be ready. You never know when the perfect house is coming up. And I think what you had mentioned a second ago, with just being able to be flexible and setting expectations once you know your budget. And before you even go into a house, what are the things that you can eliminate right off the bat? I think that's a great mindset to be in for clients, and for them to realize, hey, this may not be the perfect home that we drew up in our mind, but at the same time, that's not the end goal. Like you said, is it more important to own a home? You can always adjust the home, and if you want to put in that extra room or change the layout, you can do that. But if you aren't willing to sacrifice X, Y, or Z, it can be tough. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's balancing, desirability, as far as what about that property, you like or don't desire, and affordability. So, okay, it has these qualities, but is it affordable? And then you're balancing those things with availability.
Yeah.
Does something in this price range, that meets this these criteria, is it out there? Are we going to be able to find it realistically, or would you have to wait several months, which ultimately could end up costing you, depending on your circumstance, depending on what rates are going to do, depending on what home values are going to continue to do. So I know it's easy for us to say there's always like urgency, to like get in now. But if you look at, just historical trends and where the market is, and also the opportunity cost versus, say, if you're renting now, especially, and not owning, each month, each quarter, each year that, that you don't have that asset, basically, which for most people it's their biggest asset. You don't have that appreciating. There's opportunity cost there too in ultimately not owning a place. So, I think, having a clear picture of all these things that we've talked about, now, we can go tour places, we can kind of really get a feel for what you like. And really that doesn't completely happen. We can't paint the picture, completely until you start touring homes, because you may say that you really need to have X, Y, Z. Yeah. But now that you've been touring some houses, the ones that you really liked maybe didn't have those things. And I see that all the time. So keeping an open mind is important. And once we've identified something, that you like, we got to make an offer. So that's where knowing your down payment, having your pre-approval letter, making sure that the earnest money is going to be available to deposit right out of the gate. All of those things, we'll want to have that in order. And then from my end, if we're going to make an offer, I'm going to get on the phone with the listing agent right away and say, what's important to your seller. Obviously, price is going to be number one. Everybody wants to sell their home for, as much as possible, but do they need to move quickly? Do they need to close quickly? Do they need rent back? Are they worried about repairs and they want to make sure that somebody isn't asking for too many repairs, for example, and where a buyer can be flexible, relative to what a seller wants on those terms, beyond the sale price, we can kind of find a happy medium where you're not overpaying, you're not giving up too much, of your due diligence, for the buyer. So we're not putting, the buyer in a compromised position, but ultimately, we're going to have the best path to reaching the ultimate goal of, winning the offer, getting the house. So once we're under contract, I know there's obviously some things. So we're under contract. I'm going to say, hey, Sean, we got, our offer is accepted. Here's the contract, here's the terms, here's the close date, here's the deadlines. What does it look like from your end there as far as your communication with the buyer?
Yeah, usually once I get that from you, we're kind of off and running, and it's where we're shooting out the gates. At that point, I reach out to the borrowers, say congratulations, let them know kind of here's the next steps. And those are this. One, we're going to get the appraisal ordered pretty much right away and get that back as soon as possible to make sure that there's enough time for you guys to review it with you and also the buyer, so that they have any awareness if there's anything that needs to get addressed, or maybe you have to go back to the sellers about. Then I also let them know, okay, we're going to scrub your file and see what else we need. So that could be updated pay stubs. We're going to need the earnest money receipt once you've wired the money over to title and escrow. And here's kind of the timeline for that. We're going to need you to get homeowners insurance. If you have a contact, great, reach out to someone that, if you have renter's insurance, reach out to them about bundling or auto insurance. And then also ask me, because I have a few clients in the area that can help as well and get those lined up for you.
Sure.
And then at that point, really, it's, getting the next big thing would be locking in the interest rate, especially where they are today, them moving constantly and changing pretty much every day. I send over 3 estimates to the client, let them know, hey, here are the options. Feel free to hop back on a call. We can talk through the differences of what it looks like with a lower interest rate and having more cash to it closing, or higher interest rate and less cash to it closing, and kind of what the pros of both or the cons are of both. And then from there, it's kind of I always tell them, you're going to hear from me a lot over the next few weeks. We're going to ask for things. If you have questions, reach back out. We're more than happy to kind of talk through the different things as it comes up, because it's going to be a quick process from once you get into contract to closing. It's pretty quick, and you got to be on top of things. But the benefit of getting pre-approved is most of the legwork's done, and then it's just kind of putting the final touches on, and we'll communicate that whole process throughout everything. Yeah,
totally. And I think it's important that agent, title company, lender, buyer agent, or seller agent rather, and the buyer, our client, we're basically all communicating, and we're kind of working as a team to push these things forward. So constantly communicating deadlines, what needs to be done at every step, super important as far as, contributing to as smooth as as possible of a process. on the contract side, so you get an offer accepted, there's a lot that's going to be, if financing, of course, you're going to be going through those steps that you were just talking about. We talked about earnest money, that's basically, kind of a good faith deposit up front, part of your down payment saying, hey, I'm serious about purchasing this property so much that I'm going to deposit 1% of the purchase price, maybe 2% of the purchase price, depending on what you're comfortable with, within 3 business days of getting that offer accepted. So, that's kind of the first domino to fall. And then usually we have about 10 days. Sometimes we'll shorten it to 7 days to do an inspection on the property. Depending on the property, we can look at what inspections need to be done. Generally, we're doing a sewer scope and a radon test. Those are things, where issues come up often enough, to where we want to kind of do those every time. And then an inspector will come in and do a kind of a whole home inspection. If there's any glaring issues or any known issues with the foundation, leaks where there was mold, we might bring in other kind of specialists to inspect, and we can kind of address those things. So depending on what gets found with the inspection, there's potentially some negotiating that goes on there, especially if there's anything related to health and safety, cosmetic stuff, especially in a seller's market. It's going to be tough to say, hey, I want you to fix all these door handles and
paint the bathroom.
These cabinets are loose, or, that's just, it's not super realistic to ask for that. But if there are things where there are, again, health, safety kind of being, the key terms there. I mean, it's pretty common even in this market to say, hey, we're going to need you to fix this, or, hey, we got a bid on this. It's going to be $5,500, whatever the amount, $2,500, and then ask the seller to provide a credit toward the buyer's closing costs, which, again, especially if there's any potential liability with the health and safety piece, a seller is generally going to do the right thing there. So there is some negotiating. Again, that all happens within a week to 10 days typically. And once that period's up, usually the appraisal, correct me if I'm wrong, has already happened or will happen there pretty much right after.
Usually the appraisal is right after the inspection. They can kind of go side by side. And the appraisal is great because the same thing, they're looking at the safety and health are the kind of the main thing. So like you mentioned, the foundation, the roof, if there's any leaks or the siding on the house. It's not going to care about the cosmetics of the house or if they're, outdated appliances, et cetera. And the appraiser is mainly looking for the health and safety to make sure it's okay. And then from there, also validating the value of the home. And so they're going to look at comparable sales within the last 6 months, within a certain amount of radius, within the same square footage to make sure that the sales price on the contract matches up with that. And that's what their job is. So the inspection is a deeper dive on specific things within the house. Usually that's going to be a longer and a more detailed report. The appraisal is more for the value. So,
Yep. Cool. And then, so appraisal comes back. I don't know if we want to get into appraisal gap today. That might be for another conversation, but kind of at every step here, there are some nuances and, some different directions that things can go. So this is more of kind of an overview of kind of the typical transaction, kind of at every step. Again, I'm sure we could spend, hours talking about kind of each thing. So after the appraisal, we're looking at getting the final approval for the loan. Then we pretty much have our eyes on the close date. If everything's in place before the close date, it's not uncommon to close early. So we may have set the close date 30 days out, but all of those things we talked about happened and we're 24, 25 days out. If all parties agree, we can close early. So do see that a little bit more, I think, in this market too, where, sellers want to close early. So instead of that typical 30 to 45 days, I know a lot of people are pushing more for like 3 weeks and kind of those shorter timelines. I'm sure you can talk to that too.
Yeah, that's something for sure to stay competitive. And that's kind of, going back to the first part we talked about with different levels of pre-approval, being able to close quickly. And a lot of it's going to be driven by the appraisal when they can get out there. But especially to compete with other people, a lot of people have the same terms. Like you said, a standard 30-day close. So being able to do a 21-day close is great. And a lot of times, like you said, sellers are looking to sell their current house and move into their next. And so the quicker they get their money, the quicker they can go out and find their next house. So very common, like you said, right now, where it's been aggressive and competitive and being able to compete is one of those things, is like one of those terms that working with you to say, hey, after talking to the listing agent, you're like, yeah, this would be advantageous if we can do a quicker close. Can we do that? And that's kind of the back end of things we can figure out. Yeah, let's pay for a rush appraisal. If you guys get us all your documents, we'll push this through as quickly as possible, and we can make it happen. So
cool. Yep. And there is something that seems to be happening a little bit more, in the last couple of years, which is, the seller having possession of the house after closing. So like a rent back period. So, there's a few different circumstances why somebody would need this, but okay, we can close in 21 days potentially, but the possession, transferring to the buyer, might be 35 days or 40 days from an accepted offer, all the way to 30 days after closing, potentially, for example. So they might need to remain in the house, but closing early allows them to get the funds, the proceeds from their sale. And then, like you said, use that toward the purchase of, the home that they're moving into, for example. So, there's, again, at every step, there's, a lot of kind of, different things that, the way this could look. But Sean, I think that's why, working with pros like us, is gonna get people, the best opportunity to have a smooth experience.
Totally. Yeah. It's one of those things where it's good to work with people you trust, and you're comfortable with. When you're out home buying, I always tell people you want to work with an agent like Paul, because he's someone you're excited to call every day. He's not somebody that you're like, oh no, Paul's calling me. It's like, oh great, Paul's calling. What does he have for me today? You're excited. And I tell the same thing to all my clients, where it's like, I want you to feel comfortable. One, so let's get rid of the financing stress. So when you're out looking with you, it's enjoyable. You don't have to think about, oh, I need to get pay stubs to Sean. It's already done. And it's also one of those things when it's me calling, it's something usually, hey, exciting news. We got final loan approval. Do you want to close early? Here are your options. Here are the pros and the cons, and talking through it all. So I think that's great. Yeah.
Well, I think that pretty much sums it up.
Yeah. I think that's great.
If anybody watching this has any questions, reach out to myself or Sean. Our contact info will be around here somewhere. So exactly. Give us a call, text, email. Happy to help. If you've watched it this far, we appreciate you watching for sure. Yeah. And Sean, I appreciate you taking some time. Super helpful.
Yeah, you as well. It's great learning a little bit more and chatting with you. So appreciate it.
All right, Sean. Well, have a good weekend. I'll talk to you soon.
You too. Talk soon.
All right, everyone. Thanks for watching. If this video was helpful, hit the like button, and make sure to subscribe to the channel to get more videos like this, more videos about Portland, what it's like living here. And if you're relocating to Oregon, give us a call, send us a text, shoot us an email, click the link in the description below and schedule a Zoom call with us. Either way, we would love to help. And thanks for watching. We appreciate it.